Ladies and gentlemen, before we start, I wanted to share a awesome experience that I had yesterday. And this has nothing to do with the news or anything like that, but I just want to share this with you so that maybe it'll brighten your day a little bit. But, you know, my wife and I, we usually go out to either like brunch or breakfast or something like that, like once a week. And we decided to do it yesterday, on Monday. We usually do it around the middle of the week. But anyways, we're at a restaurant and we see a military couple, because we went there around their lunchtime. I think around 11:30, 12 o'clock, something like that is when we went. And we see a young military couple, very nice. So we decided to pay for their lunch. And the waitress told them that we paid for it. Even though we always tell the waitress, don't let them know that we're paying for it. Whenever we pay for someone's meal, we tell them, don't let them know that we pay for it. I don't want them to know. But anyways, they come up to us and, they sat down with us and we were having our coffee and they were just about finishing up, but they sat down with us and we talked to them for a few minutes. And, very nice. And they'd only been married for just shy of 2 years. So their 2-year anniversary is coming up here in a couple of weeks, I think it was. But we talked to them for a while. It was pretty nice to talk to them. So they got around to asking me, and I think this will help out young people out there, because I guess I am getting gray. So I guess with the more gray you have, I guess they say the more wisdom. So they ask us, they're like, so how long have you been married? And my wife tells them, well, we've been married over 30 years now. We've been together for about 32. And they're like, wow, all of a sudden their eyes were like, wow, because, you don't really hear that too much nowadays, that people stay married for that long. And, it is what it is. But the young man, he looks at me and he asks me, I'm surprised that it would have been awesome if the young lady would have asked me, but the young man asked me. Henry was his name. Henry asked me, so how is it? Can you just give us some advice? What did you do to get through the hard times? What's the secret to being married for so long, and still staying together willingly, of all things, right? And I said, that's simple. My wife started to say something. I was like, no, this is simple. I mean, I've got a simple answer. It's not complicated. I said, find yourself a woman. I look at my wife. I said, find yourself a woman that will always stand by you no matter what. All right, that's the first one. Right? And my wife has done that. And then I said, number 2, find yourself a woman that makes you laugh and that will allow you to make her laugh. Right? Number 2. And then I said, number 3. Find yourself a woman that loves your cooking and that also loves to cook for you just as much. And he was like, okay. And I said, and the most important thing is to always make sure that those 3 women never ever meet. Hello YouTubers, Alaska Prepper here today. We are completely out of power, ladies and gentlemen. I wanted to talk about that first today. I've got a couple of things to talk about. Not as many articles as we normally go over. Well, we're really not going to go over articles. It's just a couple of things to talk to you about that I think are very important, especially the third part of this video. I just wanted to cover with you first that more than 23,000 interior residents lose power due to windstorm. So last night we had the fastest or biggest, whatever you want to call it, windstorm that I've ever experienced here. And this, ladies and gentlemen, I believe is very accurate, even though I don't have a wind gauge that tests the speed of the wind. But this article starts off by saying Chinook winds with gusts up to 75 miles an hour in the mountains toppled trees that took down power lines, zapping power to more than 23,000 people in interior Alaska on Monday, and we are still out of power. We've been out of power for, I would say, anywhere between 12 to 16 hours so far. And let me tell you what, it was a heck of an experience right in the middle of that windstorm. And I am very, very lucky where we live, because where we live is kind of like in a valley. So a lot of the really harsh winds kind of like go over us, but they still catch our trees. And I'll tell you what, last night I was sitting at my bedroom window looking in the backyard because there was trees snapping all over our property. And of course we lost power. We've been without power for the last, 12, 16 hours. I think I already said that. And that's something that you really have to think about. Everything is good right now, ladies and gentlemen. Things are great. But what happens if you're out of power for a day or 2 or 3? there are so many trees right now that have toppled over onto power lines that although GVEA, which is our electrical utility company, I'll tell you what, in my opinion, those people there are awesome. I think they do an awesome job. I mean, whenever we have a power outage, it doesn't matter what the weather's like. It doesn't matter how many outages there are. Those guys are out there doing their job and getting power back up to us. So I have absolutely nothing but good things to say about them. Is our electric rate a little high here? I think it is. I mean, my electric rate has gone up about 50-60% since I started living here. However, I'm not complaining about that, because I think that what we pay for electricity consumption here is very well worth the service that we receive. But talking about that, what are your plans for the first day if you don't have a power outage? What are your plans for the second day? What are your plans for the third day? Don't just plan on being out of power for a day. This is actually a good exercise for us because everything in our house is running. You know, everything is running. I'm running on solar generators right now. Hopefully today is going to be a nice sunny day so I can grab all of my solar panels and charge all of my solar generators. See, my solar generators altogether will get me through about close to 2 days. So if I only had solar generators to operate on and no sun, I could operate my entire house or the things that I need to operate for close to 2 days. So my plan B is that when the solar generators are about at half capacity, about 50%, I'll start a couple of my small generators, one to run my actual appliances that I need to keep running, and the other one to power up my solar generators if we don't have any sun. So that's what I plan on doing in the future. Another scenario would be is if it was during the summertime, like around now where we get pretty good sun, I would be running half of my solar generators to run the house, and then the other half would be charging with all of the sun that we get during the day. So that's my plan on living through this outage. But the question is what is your plan? Do you have a plan for day 1? Do you have a plan for day 2 and day 3? Or even day 7? Okay, do you have enough fuel put away? Do you have at least a small generator to run those essential things that you need to run in your home? That way, all of that food that you have in the freezer and in the fridge don't go to waste. Those are things to think about, ladies and gentlemen. Right now, I'm living through it, and as you can see, I've got plenty of light. Right now, I've got plenty of energy. But even myself, with all of the backups that I have, I know that by day 7, I would probably start to get a little bit worried about what was going on if it lasted that long. But we'll see what happens. We will keep you updated. So here, I'm thinking about why in the world is Canada doing this? Trudeau plans to slash Canadian fertilizer use in similar move to the Netherlands. And why is it that they are doing this, ladies and gentlemen? I don't understand. Sometimes I think that governments right now in this time and era that we live in, that they're doing everything possible in order so that our system can collapse, literally. That they're sabotaging the system by which we've become accustomed to living and operating in. Because obviously it's not working in the Netherlands, right? See what's going on in the Netherlands right now, where governments are trying to get farmers away from farming, get farmers away from making a profit so that they have no choice but to sell their land, and eventually that they have no choice but to sell the land to the government. Because you see, with the restrictions that they're imposing in the Netherlands, it's going to make it unprofitable for a farmer to farm. And if it's unprofitable for them to farm, they're going to have to get out of the farming business because you have to make a profit in order to be able to live. And if they have to get out of the farming business en masse, meaning a lot of farmers, and they have to sell their land, who are they going to sell their land to? No one else is going to buy it in order to farm because the land has no value due to the restrictions set forth by government. So who's the only one that's going to be there to buy it? Either government or institutions that are in bed with government. So Canada is looking at what's happened here in the Netherlands, or what's happening in the Netherlands right now, and they're doing the same thing, even though it's backfiring over there. And then here in the Netherlands, where they're saying, hey, we're going to go ahead and switch over to, 95% or 75% less nitrogen in the soil. So that's going to cause so many farmers to lose their farms and whatever. And they're doing this from like one day to the other. And where did they get that idea from? Because the last time I checked, it didn't work very good for Sri Lanka, where when their old president took over, he said, hey, we're going to be going from using fertilizer to 100% organic farming from one day to the other. And look at what's happened to their country. So it looks like these governments are purposefully trying to implode their agriculture, which I don't understand why. Because if we are in the middle of a worldwide food shortage, as stated by these top officials, i.e. World Bank, World Food Program, IMF, Bank for International Settlements, governments have stated this. Governments have said we're going to stop exporting food because we need food for our people. If we are in the middle of a world food shortage, where it is estimated that up to 800 million people, right, in the next year are going to be in famine, in a state of famine, why in the world are these governments setting forth the same practices that turn Sri Lanka from a net exporter of food to a net importer? It makes no sense on a logical level when you think about it logically. So it can only lead you to conclude that these governments are purposefully doing this, that they want there to be food shortages. So I just wanted to talk about that really quick because I wanted to give you a good example of why it is that we are in the position that we're in. And it's because of these decisions that these people who will never, ever have to go hungry, they will never have to go hungry. Right? Any government official that signs a piece of paper by edict saying, yep, this is the way it's going to be, just because I am who I am and I am in the position that I am in, even though I was elected to serve the people, they are never going to suffer. But it is you that will suffer because of their actions or inactions. So keep that in mind. And I wanted to talk about the wheat production here in the United States for 2022, because I started researching this a couple of hours ago and I'm like, well, it's not looking too bad. Wheat production in the US is not looking too bad for 2022. But then I started looking at it a little bit deeper, and I hope that you can follow along with me. If I have a few spots in this segment that are chopped up, it's because I had to stop and maybe do some numbers and everything, but I'm going to try to do all the numbers with you on screen so that you can understand that this year's food production or wheat production, all right, we're talking specifically about wheat, it's not going to be as good as they're making it sound. Because when I read the first paper that I'm going to show you, man, I was like, wow, this looks pretty good. It looks pretty good. So let's go ahead and get to it. So the first article that I came across, ladies and gentlemen, was this one right here. It says, wheat, what is the outlook for world durum production? And it's dated 24 July of this year. And it says here that total production for 22-23, so this year, next year, is expected to increase 10% to 33.9 million metric tons. And I'm like, wow, that sounds pretty good. That sounds pretty good because if it's for this year and next year, 10% more, that means that it would be 10% more than what we did 21-22. I'm like, well, that's not bad. But then I started asking myself, wait a minute, how much wheat do we use and how much wheat do we export? Okay? And that's where we come to a place where we have to ask ourselves, is the government going to allow its people eventually to starve? I think that eventually when things get pretty rough, the government will allow their people to starve. Look at what happened in Sri Lanka. Look at what's happening in the Netherlands. And now look at what Canada wants to do. They are taking on practices that they know will fail. So then I went to this chart here, and this is Statista. All right, Statista. And it says that in the United States, we use roughly 31 million metric tons. So about 31 million metric tons is what we use in the United States, which is a pretty good amount. But let me see, 31 million metric tons. And then it was saying that we're going to produce about 32 or so, or 33 million metric tons. That sounds pretty good. So let's take a look at another one here before we come back to this page. Then I came to this page here, domestic outlook, and that's for this year. And then it says here all of the different types of wheat and about how much we're going to produce altogether. So right here it says pretty much these are like all of the different types of wheat that we do, right? And that we raise or grow. And altogether, we're going to be doing about 1.8 billion bushels. 1.8 billion bushels. But if you come down here, of that 1.8 billion bushels, we are projected to export about 800 billion bushels. So that leaves us with roughly just shy of a billion bushels. It leaves us just shy of a billion bushels. So then I came back to this page right here, and I'm like, well, this is metric tons. This is 31 million metric tons. See, this is 30.9, 31, right? So 31,000 times 1,000 is 31 million. So 31 million metric tons. So I'm like, okay, 31 million metric tons, but this is in bushels. This is 1 billion bushels. So then I was like, well, how much is a billion bushels in metric tons? So I came over here. 1 metric ton equals 36, or let's say 37 bushels, all right? Round up, make it easy. So 1 metric ton equals 37 bushels. So then I grabbed my calculator and I went, okay, so let's go and put in 1 billion. That's 1 billion bushels that we will have left over after we export 800 million bushels, okay? I hope you're following with me. So right now, the United States, after we export what we're going to export this year, we will have 1 billion bushels of wheat left over, right? If their projections are correct, because obviously not everything has been harvested, right? But that's what we're going off of. So if you take 1 billion and you divide it by 37, this is how many metric tons of wheat we will have left over after we export whatever we're going to export. So we're going to have 27 million, right? 27 million metric tons of wheat left over after we export what we're going to export. So I go back to this and I take a look at this, 31. We consume 31 million metric tons in the United States, but after we export what we're going to export that's projected, we only have 27 million metric tons, which is about, I don't know, 10%, 12% less wheat than what we consume. See where I'm getting at, ladies and gentlemen? So we know as a nation right now, we know that we are going to go into next year with a delta or a difference of about what is it, 4 million or so metric tons, 4 or 5 million metric tons less than what we consume. Which means what? Is it the end of the world? No, it's not the end of the world. But what it means is that those 4 million metric tons that we are not going to have is going to come off of whatever carryover we had from last year. So it's going to dig into our savings. Okay. Now, please, if there's any farmers looking at this or anything like that, please correct me if I'm wrong. Send me an email if I'm getting my numbers wrong or something like that, because I've done it before, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not perfect, but this is just me thinking out loud and sharing my thoughts with you as far as what I see. But that's 12% that's going to be taken off of our carryover. And right now, the carryover that we have, from what I understand, is less than 1 year's worth of use. So our carryover, I believe, is about 900 million bushels. So if you go 900, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and divide that by 37, it's 24. So right now, our carryover from last year is about 24, whereas we used 31. So off of that 24 that we have as a carryover, we're going to have to take away 4, which will leave us with 20. You see how dangerous it is, ladies and gentlemen? So what happens if next year is a really terrible crop? What happens if we have a year without a summer, like has happened in the past, meaning that the entire world was in a state where they could not farm for 1 whole year, where the weather just got chilly all of a sudden? Let's say a volcano erupts and gives us a year without a summer. It's happened before. So what's going to happen? This is what a savings account is for. is so that you can have it there as a backup for emergencies. And what we're doing is we are depleting our savings account. Okay, that's what we're doing. We're depleting our savings account. So now after this year, we're going to have 20 where we had 24, which is a loss of 20% of what we had in our savings account for wheat. Right? I haven't done this research on everything else like corn, soybeans, and things like that. But just with wheat, that's going to make prices of things continue to go up. And this, in my opinion, is the best case scenario. This, in my opinion, is if the carryover that they state that we have, we actually have. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So what's the moral of the story here? Number one, prepare. That's the moral of the story. But why? Why? Because you can never know what's going to happen. I didn't think we were going to have this windstorm and lose power and all of that stuff. You never know. Right? So prepare. Number two, governments have shown time and time and time again that the decisions that they make are not for the people that they are supposed to be representing. Just look at Canada. Just look at the Netherlands. Just look at Sri Lanka. And take a look at the good old USA. So prepare. And number three, even if these numbers are accurate, we are still going into a deficit, all right, for our carryover, which is our savings account. And ladies and gentlemen, you can't just print wheat out of thin air. You can't just print corn out of thin air like you can fiat currency. So once our savings account is depleted, then where we're going to go. That's why you must prepare. I hope you got something out of this, and I hope that the way that I say things, kind of like makes sense to you. Right? Because I know I look at these things, so, I mean, I don't know, maybe I look at it in a different way than other people look at it, but to me it makes sense what I'm telling you right here, and that it's that this year we are going to produce enough wheat to feed the entire country, but we've decided to export enough of it to where we will have to dip into our savings. And does that make sense to you? All right, having said that, I have a dentist appointment today, but guess what, ladies and gentlemen? I did a special payday prep yesterday, all right? One that I did because I had to go get something that I forgot that I needed, and I wanted to make sure that they had it. But I ended up picking a few other things that I think you ought to have, but I'll let you be the judge of that. I should be putting that video out later on today. I still have to upload it and edit it and all that kind of stuff. But I thought that this one right here was good enough for me to put out, even though I am milking my solar generators out of some of their juice. Having said that, I hope that you'll have a great day. Remember to be good to each other. When good people do good things happen. Remember to reach one, teach one, and repeat. If we all did this, the world would be a better place, and you know that it will be a better place. Many blessings to all of you and your families. I'm Alaska Prepper. I'm out.